You are traveling to another train of thought, one not from this century and challenging the status quo. You are now entering the paradigm shift.
Well, welcome to the Paradigm Shift here on the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty from the flames of tyranny. And yes, this is a live show on June 18th, 2018, Monday. Good morning. Welcome to another work week. We'll get you started off on a good footing here. We have a few things to talk about this morning, and I will cut out a few minutes early so that I can prep to get Suzanne on sharp at 10 a.m. So we had Suzanne and I were going to talk. We're going to talk about our mutual but separate vacations because she was in one part of the country and I was in another. But we were on vacation about the same time. We're going to talk about those during her show, I'm pretty sure. But I will just say that I had a nice time in Maine, visiting some good friends. If you're listening, Patton and Heather, I had a great time. Thank you. So it's just such a beautiful part of the country. I enjoy being there, and I'm actually looking for some property up there to probably for a retirement getaway place in a few years when I get around to retirement. Hopefully we all get a chance to get some sort of retirement and not have to work to the day we die, but we'll see. Looking at, I had no plans on talking about this, but I saw last week some news saying that Social Security and Medicare are going to go broke sooner than they had anticipated. Well, when you steal all the money out of it and spend it and keep putting IOUs in there, well, it's going to go broke. Matter of fact, the whole government's going to go broke. But that's another day, another show. Today we have some other things to discuss. I think I'm going to start with, I'm not going to do this very long. There was another shooting in New Jersey. Really didn't find out much about this one. Nothing much was said. I'm thinking perhaps it was just gang violence. Don't know, but there was a lot of people injured. This was, I believe, in Trenton, New Jersey Arts Festival. Shooting leaves 22 injured, one suspect dead. So the police ended up killing one of the suspects. They took another one into custody. I think there was a dispute. Nearly 24 people were injured after gunshots broke out early Sunday during a fight at an all-night art event in New Jersey's capital city, leaving one suspect dead, which authorities said appeared to be caused by a neighborhood beef. So the argument was over something, between a couple people there, and other people got injured in the process. Mercer County prosecutor Angelo Onofre said that at a news conference that a total of 22 people were injured in the shooting, 17 of whom were treated for gunshot wounds at nearby hospitals. A second suspect is in custody. So here we are again. There's another mass shooting. This one is just that people were caught up in between a dispute between two people and were injured. This again goes into what Suzanne and I often talk about with our shows. We talk about preparedness, being situationally aware, see what's going on around you. So if you're in a situation, we'll talk about situation awareness for just a minute about this. So you're at an all-night arts festival. You see two people beginning to argue. That may be your cue to put the phone away, not stand there and film it, and move to someplace safe. So there's 22 people, 17 people were injured, shot in this thing. Why? Probably because they were standing there gawking at it instead of taking it seriously and realizing that this could get out of control. You do not know that these people aren't armed. And these two people happen to be armed. Suzanne, I saw you unmuted. Did you want to chime in on this New Jersey shooting?
I thought guns were strictly regulated in New Jersey, so I'm absolutely gobsmacked that such a thing happened there.
Well, I'm just waiting to find out if they used hollow points. Hollow points are very strictly restricted in New Jersey. Even law enforcement. I've seen stories where law enforcement from out of state carried their firearm into New Jersey and were arrested because they had hollow points in their firearm. What's the self-defense round? What does everyone carry in their firearm for self-defense, Suzanne? Go ahead, tell everyone, because I think everyone knows.
I have salt in my guns because I don't really want to hurt somebody that is trying to kill me. No, seriously, San Francisco has a similar ordinance where you can't even, believe it or not, there are ammo and gun stores in San Francisco, and they are not allowed to sell hollow points. Now, I have hollow points in my firearm, my everyday carry at all times, because that is the round you want to use in a situation, so you don't have a pass through like you can get in Full Metal Jacket and hit an innocent bystander. So they don't really understand you're actually being safer with hollow points. So to the extent that they allow you to have a firearm where you may shoot someone, you don't want to hurt him too bad. So two things: you have better stopping power with firepower, and you don't have as much of a pass through issue where you're going to hit somebody else. But they don't understand that.
Right, and that was a problem. I believe the city of New York for a while was having a lot of issues because they were using a ball ammo in their 9mm. And so what was happening is they were having bystanders injured in a lot of these shootings, officer shootings, because of the bullet. You have to understand the ballistics of a 9mm. The 9mm round, generally speaking, unless you use a really heavy grain, is a very fast bullet. And if you use a ball type ammo, which is a range ammo, it tends to pass through whatever you shoot because it doesn't deform and expand, which slows it down and keeps it in whatever you hit. So self-defense rounds are designed to expand because, number one, you don't want pass through, but number two, you want to put the threat down. So let's just get back to the situation awareness thing. You are correct. New Jersey is very, very strict on their firearms laws. I saw a story of a Pennsylvania, where I was going with, when I went with that was I saw a story of a Pennsylvania corrections officer who was arrested in New Jersey and charged with a felony because he had hollow points in his firearm. He was, he's law enforcement. I mean, seriously. I mean, it doesn't matter. Quite honestly, civilians, I don't see why civilians can't carry hollow points in their firearm either. Law enforcement had nothing to do with that, other than the fact that it just highlights the absurdity of New Jersey's laws. So you got these guys, they're shooting at each other, and people around them are getting hurt. That is the whole point where I was going with this, with the situation awareness. And I think that's when you chimed in, because you have to know what's going on around you. And just because it appears to be a verbal argument does not mean it's not going to turn violent. If you're in these situations, you're out. You're in the Walmart parking lot. Two guys are arguing. Don't get your phone out and film it. Move along. Call 911 and have a police officer come and check the situation out. Don't stand there and become a bystander victim as 17 people. There was, I think, if I read this article further down, I think there was a 15-year-old that's in grave condition. This 15-year-old may die because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, not situationally aware, not leaving an area where it's very dangerous. So, Suzanne, did you have any final thoughts on that before we move on?
It's interesting. People like to see turmoil. They like to see these fights. You see, they get their telephones out. They film everything. They cheer them on. And again, we talk about the difference between a first responder and an immediate responder. And rather than having a lot of immediate responders around, we have gawkers. And I'm not advocating mandating that people be required to render assistance. I agree. The first response when you see something like this is just leave. You don't know when it's going to escalate. Could be gun, could be knife, could be a lot of other people getting in and getting a little riot, a mini riot on your hands. And in any event, the best thing to do is just get out of there. When one of my pistol tactics classes that I took with Louis Auerbach, one of the scenarios was, well, there's somebody in line ahead of you at the grocery store and the person starts to get unraveled. What do you do? And I'm thinking how, rather than practicing our firearms techniques, is I'm under no obligation to render assistance to the store employee. It's up to me to protect myself and my family. If you see somebody getting unruly in a situation like that, pick your scenario, just get out, get to safety. You don't want to wait until it becomes dangerous. There's no harm in walking out and coming back later.
Right. And you I don't know, if, Suzanne, if you remember that there was a story, it's been a long time ago. There was a robbery at a jewelry store, and a bystander tried to stop it. Unarmed bystander tried to stop an armed robbery, and he ended up dead. And I believe a concealed carry permit holder ended up shooting the perpetrator of the crime. But, if the guy hadn't gotten involved, just let this thing play out, there would have been no gunfire at all. He would be alive. The other guy probably wouldn't have had to draw his firearm, because, again, this is the whole thing. Just because you are a carry holder, and you alluded to this, just because you have a firearm on you, you have a permit to carry it legally, does not mean you need to get involved. It does not mean you should get involved, other than calling the police, because every bullet you fire from that firearm, you own. If you hit someone else, you own that bullet that hit that bystander.
That bullet has a lawyer attached to it. And that lawyer,
right,
and the government will own you. I had talked about this case before, the one in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I'll give you the abbreviated version, where a police officer was being attacked by a man that was on steroids, was going through roid rage. That was a very large bodybuilder, and they were fighting for the officer's service weapon. And the officer already had multiple broken bones in his face. The perpetrator was close to getting the firearm. The Glock was being slammed on the ground. The officer was trying to jam it. And the man was sitting on him, holding him down. And a gentleman shot the assailant multiple times. Finally, it took a headshot to get him to stop. Needless to say, this turned into a huge event, because the shooter, the officer, were white, the assailant was black. So obviously the NAACP, Jesse Jackson, and all the characters got involved. The city attorney defended the police officer on the taxpayer's dime, justifiably so. But the man who saved the police officer's life, they defended, the police officer, but the man who saved the officer's life was going to have to move. He was attacked on all grounds, called a racist, and his defense came out of his own pocket, and his life was ruined, because now they knew him in this community, and clearly he was motivated by nothing other than race.
Correct. Even though he was motivated by saving the officer's life.
So be very judicious in where you get involved. Would I have gotten involved in that same scenario? Knowing what I do then, I don't think I could have stood by and watched this officer be brutalized and then take the chance of these people getting shot, because there were witnesses surrounding it and gathering up. And again, this man who was disabled was the only one that took the shot. That's why it's really, really incumbent upon you and important to train and have a firearm you are comfortable shooting. As you know, I just changed my everyday carry, and I told people, you know what? And I was training over the weekend with headshots in my backyard with my silhouettes, and I did drills where I had three targets set up, and I was just aiming for the head there, and I did not miss a single shot. I am comfortable using that in a public setting. My other Glock, the 27, I was not. It would have been for something right up close and personal. So it's very empowering to have something that you can rely on. The type of gun does make a difference as well.
Right, and it's training, because while I was up in Maine,
Yes.
we did some training. We did some shooting, and I was same thing. Did some we call them body armor drills. You always shoot center mass. I mean, you're always going for the big target,
Right?
Because again, you own the bullet. Whatever comes out of the gun, you own. So you want to go for the biggest targets. You want to go center mass. In a situation like that, I always revert to my training. So if I had shot him twice in the center mass, I would have gone to a headshot next, because we train body armor in my law enforcement duties, that's what we train. It's called a body armor drill. You shoot 2 to the center, nothing happens. You go 1 to the head. It's just the way it is. I mean, you have to end a threat. I didn't intend to talk about all this. I hope you guys are enjoying it, because I mean, I am too. I love talking about prepping and situational awareness and just being prepared for whatever might come your way in life. I mean, because you never know what's going to happen.
Well, speaking of which, if the gun control is complete, what we're seeing also, just to digress a little bit, because this is just breaking news. Yesterday, there was a woman shouting Allahu Akbar in France, and she attacked people with a box cutter. Clearly, we don't know what her motive is, but when this is something else now we have to watch as we're getting more gun control. People are feeling shamed about not carrying, and then we're getting more gun-free zones. There are going to be opportunists, for whatever motivation, whatever reason, will know that there will be a lot more soft targets. So, there are places here in Utah where I am not allowed to carry a firearm, and I am really not willing to risk a year in jail for it's a Class A misdemeanor if you carry a loaded firearm in a place where they're not allowed, such as Whole Foods. So thank goodness we have Smiths where we can carry our firearms. But if you go to a place like that, you better be extra alert, because somebody is going to know that the area is a soft target and people are not going to be ready and able to defend themselves. So be aware of that as well.
Right. And you brought up grocery stores. Store parking lots are one place that people just tend to let down their situation oh my goodness, you can tell I was on vacation. So you English speaking folks out there, it is situational awareness. I can speak English once in a while.
I see that all the time. While you untie your tongue, I'll run with this for just a moment. I see this all the time, especially moms with little kids. They are so focused, and justifiably so, again, on getting their little ones strapped down in their car seat. Meanwhile, their purse, wide open, is behind the vehicle because they can't get the cart with the purse in their car secured. So they're a target that way. Somebody could grab them. You just see them completely unaware of their surroundings. You've got to be able to focus on both. How are you doing now?
Oh, I'm fine. I mean, I'm well rested, pretty much. I mean, we're going to talk. I think we're going to talk about our trips, right, during your show. Okay.
Sure,
well, I won't get into what I was doing in Maine. We'll do that later. But where I was going with this is, you'll see people walking through the parking lot with their head down in their phone, not knowing at all what's going on around them. Again, so here we go. Let's go back to these 2 people arguing. They're arguing. It turns violent. They pull guns and start shooting. You have your head down. You don't even know what's going on. You don't even know there's an argument going on. And you become a victim because you're not aware of your surroundings. So, again, I didn't intend to spend this much time on this article, but it was a very good article because it highlighted people's tendency to want to pick up their phone and film things. I don't know if that's what happened, because the article didn't say that. But, I mean, come on, Suzanne. Everywhere you go, what is everyone doing? They had their phone out and they got it up in front of them. They're up there. Here we go. I'll get mine. They're up there like this. Yeah, look at that. Woo, look at that. Woo. Hey, look at me. I'm in the picture now. Woo, you gotta think a little bit before you do some of these things, because like I said, there's a 15-year-old that's fighting for his life or her life. I didn't see whether they said it was a boy or girl, because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Try to get yourself out of these situations before it even happens.
Part of it is also normalcy bias. We just don't think that something's going to go south right away. I mean, look at a couple instances I'll tell you about. They both involved concerts. Great White, the band Great White. I don't know how many years ago this was, but they were performing in an indoor music hall, and the pyrotechnics got out of hand and caught fire with the soundproofing equipment. People stood around and wasted precious time because they thought it was part of the show. And again, we just don't want to accept quickly the notion that something might be very much amiss. Another example is the Las Vegas shooting, and people thought they were firecrackers or something else going on, but certainly not gun gunfire. And then, then the concert, the people that were manning the lights illuminated the entire audience by turning all the spotlights on, like the event had been over. So now the shooter had a clear target with the people lit up. So again, no planning ahead of time. You need planning in an event like that. And you also need to be cognizant, and as you said, situationally aware that if there's something going on, how are you going to get out of a concert quickly? You won't get me into a concert hall again like that. There's just no way.
Yeah, that happened to be during a time when I was a firefighter paramedic. We studied when you go to anything. I believe even when I went to code enforcement, we studied that fire in that bar. It was a bar.
Yeah.
That Great White was doing, and there were fire exits that were blocked. There was all kinds of things wrong. It was just a conflict. Everything just came together to create a very, very bad situation, and a lot of people died.
Yeah.
But again, people thought it was part of the show, when in fact it was a life and death situation starting right in front of them. But they stood there
recording the whole thing. Yeah, they were recording everything.
Yeah. So again, it's just time, folks, when you're out, make sure you're aware of what's going on around you. Don't take things for granted. There are people that will do crazy things. So make sure that you're aware of it. So I think that I'm going to call that good for the New Jersey shooting. I appreciate Suzanne jumping in and joining me. Let's go to this. Let me grab the story and we'll get into that a little bit. And then I want to read a paragraph to you. Excuse me. All right. From the Hill. And this is written by Luis Sanchez. This is from 6/12/18. I saw this while I was on vacation, and I knew I was going to come back to this when I got home. The proposal to split California into 3 states earns spot on the ballot. A proposal to split California into 3 separate states got enough votes on Tuesday to be added to the midterm ballot in November. Tim Draper, a venture capitalist, was the proponent of the long shot initiative to split the state, which got nearly 420,000 valid signatures, more than enough to be included on the general election ballot in November, according to California's Secretary of State. Adding the proposal to the ballot is the first in a long number of steps that would be required to actually split the country's third largest and most populous state. Even if California voters support the proposal in November, the California state legislature would have to vote in favor of it. The breakup would also likely be challenged in court and would need congressional approval. A tough get in today's hyper-partisan Washington. I'm going to stop there because there's just some glaring problems with what they said. It was true. Those sentences true, but it is misleading. The breakup will also be challenged in court, which it would. The federal courts would get involved, and for all a few listeners out there, I can open this up. I'll open this up. I'm opening Facebook up, and you can post on our Cerberus page. Here, I'll tell you what I'll do. While I'm doing the show, I'm going to go to the Cerberus page, and I'm going to type this so you guys can see this post immediately here, because I'm going to do it right here in front of you guys. Do the federal courts have authority over California's secession vote? And question mark, and it's posted. You guys answer that question, you listeners out there. Okay, it's just published. It should be going up there right now. So you guys out there that are listening, go there and answer. And I'm sure there'll be some. I know I can guarantee I I'm gonna guess the first person that answers this, and his initials are AA. I will bet that his initials are his is gonna be the first response to that question. See if I'm right. You know who you are, and I'm pretty sure that's who's gonna answer it. So anyway, do the federal courts have authority over this proposed split of California? The answer is obviously no. Yet that's where it's going to go, and the courts will probably say they have here's what they'll say: the Civil War settled secession, because that's what you hear all the time. You start talking about secession, and as you can see, I'm wearing a secession shirt today. I decided to do that since I was going to be discussing this. You'll hear people say that the Civil War settled secession. So just because the North had the military might to compel the Southern states back into a voluntary union, that makes secession settled, right? No. You go to the Declaration of Independence and look and see what Jefferson wrote. Was he talking about a legal right, something that's granted to us by government, or was he talking about a natural right? Suzanne, I know you just unmuted your mic again because I hit on another one of our favorite subjects.
Well, I'm letting you know that right now, this is how important our show is. I'm not trying to toot our own horn or anything, but somebody just posted on my wall. I'm going to just read you the highlights, but these are the questions people are asking. Where do you specifically point your historical finger to where the colonies transcend from colonies to states? Textbooks rarely discuss this at all, and that's absolutely true. You never see in the books that they're talking about the colonies being free and ought to be free and independent states, like Thomas Jefferson said. And he's wanting to know this history of how this happened. And this really goes right into when we talk about the issue of secession. It's almost like they did not have their identity until the Constitution. And there's somehow this presumption that they were subservient to the general government from the very get-go. I think the guy that wrote a book on McCulloch versus Maryland, by the way, which was one of the first steps in usurping the sovereignty of the states. And we had and he said that when the Constitution was created, the states and a nation entered into a compact, which is an absolutely absurd proposition, Kevin Goodsman, akin to being present at your own conception. So yes, this is a great topic, and I'm glad you're having it. I told the listener or the follower on my page, I linked the network and said, go, we're discussing this right now. So hopefully he's tuning in.
I hope so too. But to answer that question, and see, again, this is where the public school education has failed to teach historically correct history. Who seceded from Great Britain first? The colonies or some of the states? Suzanne, I'm almost positive you know the answer to that. Because when you look at somebody seceded from Great Britain in May, and the Declaration wasn't signed until what? July. So there was a state they separated. It was Virginia. I'm going to give the answer. Suzanne, go ahead if you have some more insight on that. I didn't plan on talking this, so I really didn't get my book out and start studying all that again. But Virginia, they left Great Britain. They separated in May. Is that not correct?
I'm not sure about the exact date, but here's what I try to tell people. We had colonies that seceded from England. They, in turn, seceded from the Articles of Confederation. I'm going to get into that a little bit and form the Constitution. So we have a history of these peoples, these sovereign and independent states, nations, that secession's part of their being, their natural state. And all of a sudden now they ratify the Constitution with the premise that it is no longer possible to secede. So they're giving up decades of tradition to all of a sudden enter a union from which they can never leave. And then people will say, abandon that and say, yeah, well, Texas be white. So the Supreme Court said they couldn't. We have just become so indoctrinated that we embrace this form of judicial tyranny. Well, the Supreme Court has spoken. Clearly, secession is never legal. Never mind, it was part of our, what I refer to, revolutionary legacy. Never mind, killing the unborn is murder. Roe v. Wade says that everybody has to do it. Everybody's doing it now.
You had Dred Scott. You had Dred Scott.
You know, so on my last show, I said, for crying out loud, we had Bowers versus Hardwick, which upheld, where the Supreme Court upheld, I believe it was a Georgia statute forbidding sodomy. Well, that was overturned in, I think it was another Texas case, it's Texas v. Lawrence, and that was overturned. So if we can overturn the Supreme Court's position on homosexual sodomy to appease, on slavery, we can't save the unborn because the Supreme Court has declared abortion to be the law of the land. This is insanity.
And the Supreme Court ruled that Jefferson's principles in the Declaration of Independence are somehow all of a sudden not applicable because the oracles in black dresses said it's not applicable anymore. Well, seriously.
And in my show in the next hour, I'm going to get into what I talk about frequently, because Mark Kreslins and I, you'll be joining us, we'll be doing a show about the Declaration of Independence. But I think it's also important to discuss why we need to let go of this insane notion that the Constitution, we have to just hang on to that tooth and nail. It was not divinely inspired. That's a battle I'm up against here all the time. The Constitution itself was an abomination and an affront to liberty, and we'll get into that. But I'll let you carry on with secession, because I think you're going to get into the Bledsoe book, which is outstanding when it comes to this proposition.
I'm gonna hold it up here. If any of you folks out there need a book on secession, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see it. I'll give you the title, folks that are listening. Is Davis a traitor, or was secession a constitutional right previous to the War of 1861? And this is Albert Taylor Bledsoe. And I've talked about this book before, but I know we have a lot of new listeners. Albert Taylor Bledsoe was a lawyer, and he was going to take on the defense of Jefferson Davis at his treason trial. After the war, the North arrested Jefferson Davis. They were holding him to try him for treason, to put him to death. Albert Taylor Bledsoe took on his case and had prepared this case to defend Jefferson Davis in the trial, which never happened. The North realized that if this trial went forward, they were going to lose in public opinion, because they knew they didn't have a right to force them back into this. They knew the South, and the people understood that they had a right to secede, that they had a right to self-determination. So this never happened. So Bledsoe went through all this trouble to make this defense of Jefferson Davis, and the trial never happened, so he put it in a book. He put the defense of Jefferson to pen in a book. And this is the book right here. This is Bledsoe, chapter 2 of Is Davis a Traitor? It is conceded both by Webster and Story. All right, so you have to understand who Webster and Story were. They were two of the biggest proponents of nationalism, that there was no right to secede. And if I'm not mistaken, Susanna, if I'm wrong, you correct me. But Story was on the Supreme Court, as I remember. I think he was a justice on the Supreme Court. I believe Webster was a senator. It is conceded both by Webster and Story that if the Constitution is a compact which the states are the parties, then the states have a right to secede from the Union at pleasure. There's some terminology here we've talked about in the past, and he hits on it, that the Constitution is a compact. Today, we use the word contract, but that's what in that day, they called it a compact. the states entered into a contract between each other. The Constitution set that up. Now, again, I believe that there was the structural flaws in the Constitution, and honestly, I believe that Madison and Hamilton set these structural flaws in there on purpose to get us to nationalism. But that's another show. Thus says Webster, in stating the consequences of Mr. Calhoun's doctrine. Now, Mr. Calhoun was a big supporter of state sovereignty and the ability of states to secede, to leave the compact. Okay, so in stating the consequences of Mr. Calhoun's doctrine, if a league between sovereign powers have no limitation as to the time of duration and the content, and containing nothing, making it perpetual, it subsists only during the good pleasure of the parties. Although no violation be complained of, if, in the opinion of either party, it is violated, such party may say he will no longer fulfill its obligations on his part, but will consider the whole league or compact at an end. Although it might be one of its stipulations that if it should be perpetual, like in the manner of Mr. Justice Story says, the obvious deductions which may be and indeed have been drawn from considering the Constitution a compact between the states are that it operates as a mere treaty or convention between them and has an obligatory force no longer than suits its pleasure or its consent continues. Suzanne touched on that a little bit ago in her statements earlier.
Hey, Jeff,
go ahead.
We'll post something on our network page as well, because Brian McClanahan from the Abbeville Institute, the author also of the Founding Fathers Guide to the Constitution, the 9 presidents who screwed up America, 4 who tried to save her, in the recent book on Hamilton, just posted an article on the Abbeville Review called Is Secession Treason? This was published June 12th of this year. So I'm going to put this up on the network page and people can review that. Just wanted to let you know what people look for that. I'll do that right now. That'd
be great. So I'm going to go back to one sentence here that is key in this paragraph. If a league between sovereign powers have no limitation on its time of duration or contain nothing, making it perpetual. Go to your pocket Constitution, folks. Find a clause that makes the Constitution or this compact perpetual. Again, I challenge the listeners out there, find the clause that makes this inviolate. They can't leave it. So there's a compact between the states that has a indefinite time period. It's in forever, or there's no way for anyone to leave it. It's perpetual. You must stay in it. Find it in the Constitution, because you're not going to find it. That was the point that Suzanne was making earlier, that the states, and this is why what Bledsoe is talking about in the very beginning of this chapter is so important, that the states it subsists only during the good pleasure of the parties. Who's the parties? The states. So, do the courts, again, does the federal court have jurisdiction over California deciding to leave? No. The compact is between the states, between the parties. Will anyone out there defend what we are living under now as being true to the Constitution as it was originally intended? Has the general government in Washington, D.C. broken the compact between the states? Anyone? you can't be an honest person and say that they are living up to the contract. They break it daily. I was going to get to another story. I was going to get to this whole fiasco between the DOJ, the GOP, and all the, what a mess. Now,
hey, Jeff, also
yes.
Really quick, we are talking about a lot of history here, and we have an opportunity for listeners to take advantage of an offer that was extended to us by none other than Tom Woods. Liberty Classroom, a typical basic membership is, I believe, $89. Tom Woods is offering us a discount of $40 to bring the cost down to $49, where we can access their full curriculum in a basic membership. So go to Liberty Classroom. I believe it's libertyclassroom.org, but you can find it, Tom Woods Liberty Classroom. And when you go to purchase a membership, type in code CRN for Cerberus Radio Network, and you could take advantage of that offer. Just want to let our listeners know.
Yeah, I fail to mention that, and I really should mention that more often. You'll get the likes of Brian. I believe that Brian McClanahan is a contributor there, is he not?
Yes, he
I don't
is.
remember. I'm pretty sure he is.
Yes,
Ron
he
Paul
is.
a contributor there. You will get some of the greatest thinkers of this century in that membership. It is very much worth the. So, Suzanne, as far as I know, I've not lost your audio.
Okay, I was just checking. Can you hear me now?
Oh, I hear you perfectly fine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and you're going out over the radio. You're everything's perfect. Yes, I don't mention this near enough. Please go there and buy a membership, because you're getting it almost at half price. It is quite the deal. Yeah, and you'll have access to all kinds of different. What are their lectures? It's almost like getting a college education for free for $49 a year.
You listen to the courses on American history and constitutional history, you will know more than any federal court judge or any lawyer, by the way, because again, if you want to understand the Constitution and what it really means, you have to look to historians, not to lawyers. And Brian McClanahan's book, or his latest endeavor, he has new classes on there about Alexander Hamilton. And Kevin Gutzman is recording his series. I believe it's 12 lectures on Thomas Jefferson. And this is going to be going beyond the scope of his book. That should be ready by the end of June. And he will be coming on the air to discuss this course and other things with us. So some good stuff coming up.
All right. And you got it. And Kevin Gutzman's awesome. Tom Wood is awesome. Like I said, and Brian McClanahan, Rethinking the American Union for the 21st Century. That was Brian McClanahan's book, I believe. Is a very, very good book. Please look up that one. That's a great reference. It talks about scale, and that's one of the biggest problems we're facing today. Is we have a government in Washington D.C. that's trying to rule 320 million people over 50 states, over vast areas, and the scale is out. It's out of scale. You can't have 435 legislators in the Congress, 100 in Congress, making all the laws to rule this vast area. They don't have the slightest clue what works in Oregon. They don't have the slightest clue what works in Texas, because we're culturally different. But back to this real quick, because I want to finish up on this, because I'm going to really need to end here in just a minute or two. They made one other statement. Would need congressional approval. They're technically correct. They would need congressional approval for one reason and one reason only. If they were seeking to join the Union. If they seceded, became 3 states, and say the Bay Area, Los Angeles corridor, I believe that's, if you look at the map, I don't have it in front of me right now. I think that's kind of a corridor there. If they wanted to join the Union as a state, Congress would have to approve it. To say the northern part did not, they decided, you know what? We don't even want to be a state. We just want to be our own country. And they left. Do they need permission from Congress? No, they don't. that is, again, that is some of the public school indoctrination coming out in this writing. Yes, they would need permission to join as a state. If they decided to leave and decided, we're not coming back in, we're quite happy being on our own. We have great economic base. We can take care of ourselves. We'll enter into a treaty with you if you guys want mutual protection. We can our military will help your military defend this shore, and we're just going to be on our own. Okay. In 1776, did some court have to rule and say that we could secede from Great Britain? Of course they didn't. So why today do people think that they need to go to a federal court and get permission from them to separate from this voluntary compact? That's the other part of what Bledsoe was saying. He's on the floor now. He just dropped off the desk. I hit it while I was talking with my hands as usual. Bledsoe talked about the voluntary union, and that's what it is. There is no part of the Constitution that makes it forever, makes it perpetual, and does not exclude the possibility of people seceding from it. All right. We'll get to that Gowdy DOJ argument another time. Again, it's they're arguing. You got Congress arguing with an organization. Number one was not the FBI and everything is not in the Constitution. They don't have to fund it. They have the power to unfund it, defund it, and get rid of it. But they're going to sit there and argue about it. It's again. I had a post. I was talking to some people on a different post, and we were discussing something else. And I said, it's political theater. It's red meat for the red team. The red team's out there cheering him on. Rah, rah, rah. Go, Trey Gowdy. You're the man. Yeah, woo. And they're going to do nothing. Nothing's going to change. All right. I have to go. It's 47 minutes after the hour. In just a short 13 minutes from now, well, actually 12 minutes from now, the Wasatch Report will be back live. And we will continue on with this discussion of secession, I'm sure. We're going to talk about our vacations, and we're going to talk about other things, I'm sure. It's going to be a great show. Stay tuned in just a few minutes for the Wasatch Report. This has been the Paradigm Shift with Jeff Johnson, your host, on the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty from the flames of tyranny.